Let's start with MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai, MS Now's Kayla Gardner at the White House, and our military analyst, Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel Jack Jacobs. Inzamam, what more do we know about Iran's decision to open the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, Anna, it's a pretty remarkable decision and a significant one as well, and just gives you a sense that what a few words posted on X can do to the oil prices as we've currently seen. This is clearly a decision made by Iran on the back of discussions that Lebanon and Israel and the US have been having about pausing fighting there. It was a sticking point in the initial peace negotiations between the US and Iran, and now the decision has been made to essentially open up the Strait of Hormuz, that very narrow waterway where usually 20% of the world's oil usually passes through, which has been a huge sticking point over the last 7 weeks of this conflict. For many weeks now, Iran has had a chokehold of the economy by keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. And now the foreign minister of Iran, Saeed Abbas Araghchi, has said that in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of the ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that will come as a huge relief, not only to the markets, but also the many thousands of seafarers that have been on the Strait of Hormuz, the entrance and around it over the last few weeks, waiting to get a signal that they can pass through. We've got to remember as well, Iran has been specifically hitting vessels over the last 7 weeks, ever since this war began, targeting a number of ships, causing huge explosions, causing deaths to a number of seafarers as a result. That has been a very dangerous and a very perilous waterway. And over the last few days, this diplomacy has been taking place now to allow essentially this waterway to open up over the next 10 days of this ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. What has the president said as a result? He first tweeted saying that the Strait of Hormuz was open, and then on his Truth Social posted that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage, but the naval blockade, which is important, will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. This process should go very quickly in that most of the points are already negotiated. So this initial step, I think, a very positive one, Anna.
Kayla, tell us more about what you're hearing there at the White House and how the administration is responding, what it means for the path forward when it comes to U.S.-Iran negotiations.
Yeah, Inzamam just walked you through some of those Truth Social posts, which notably both happened after the market opened. And I think a key part of that second Truth Social post that the president talked about was this line where he says, such a time until our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. So what does that word transaction mean? It could be potentially a financial transaction. Iran has notably asked for payment to cover the cost of war damages to rebuild their country. It could also be discussing a transaction of uranium. The president has talked about Iran agreeing to hand over some of their uranium. But just a few minutes ago, the president posted again on Truth Social, and he's saying no money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. He also says that the U.S. will get all, quote, nuclear dust that was destroyed by, he says, by B-2 bomber. So the president seems to be clarifying there that the U.S. does not intend to hand over money to Iran and that they do intend to get that underground uranium, which the U.S. has been so concerned about.
And the president also in that same post saying Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. Colonel Jack, that's important because this Israeli-Lebanon ceasefire seemed to be a trigger for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But that ceasefire is fragile. The ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is fragile. The strait was seen as leverage for Tehran. Is there still risk for ships to transit?
There's plenty of risk. And one of the most interesting points about it all is that polls indicate that the Israeli citizens don't want the attacks on Hezbollah to cease. They want them to continue. They want Hezbollah eliminated. And it looks like Netanyahu yielded to pressure from the White House to cease fire so that the United States could declare the strait open and to facilitate American negotiations with Iran to end the war altogether. But in the meantime, Israel still has this buffer zone that's not big enough to protect citizens in northern Israel from Hezbollah attacks. It's really complicated, and all this stuff has to happen all at the same time. Hezbollah has to give up. The arrangements between the United States and Iran has to be concluded, and all within 10 days.
Yeah, not much time at all. Inzamam, take us through more of the terms of this Israel-Lebanon ceasefire.
Well, Anna, this is a ceasefire that's being celebrated in Lebanon, quite literally, people on the streets celebrating. And that's because we've had more than 1.2 million people displaced as a result of the fighting and the bombardment inside Lebanon. More than 2,000 people have been killed, and now we're seeing some of those people return. And yes, look, it might only be for 10 days, but I think people get a sense of positivity that these discussions are being had and that this ceasefire is taking place. But as you mentioned, it is very, very fragile, and I think that's a huge concern. Let's go through some of the key points. Well, Israel, the initial point is that Israel pauses its offensive operations inside of Lebanon, that Lebanon as a government takes meaningful steps to prevent Hezbollah operations in response to Israel, that there is recognition that Lebanon security forces have that exclusive responsibility for national defense, and that the US facilitates these direct negotiations aiming for some form of a comprehensive peace agreement. Right now, there are still, though, Israeli forces inside of Lebanon, a number of ground troops in the south of Lebanon. And leading up to this ceasefire, there was intense bombardment by Israel inside Lebanon. Many people were killed as a result of that. And that just gives you a sense of the real fragility of this. What has Benjamin Netanyahu said in retaliation? Well, he said that we've got two fundamental demands for these peace talks between Israel and Lebanon. First, the disarmament of Hezbollah. That's one thing that Israel has been very strict on. That's something that they need and want. And second, a sustainable peace agreement. Hezbollah insisted on two conditions. First, that Israel must withdraw from all Lebanese territory. Second, a ceasefire based on the quiet for quiet model. I agreed to neither of those. So I think long-lasting peace negotiations still very much hang in the balance, but it's something that the US president is pushing for. And I think that if there are talks between the US and Iran in the coming days, then this is something that they'll definitely be discussing to ensure that it's on the agenda to make sure that there's peace inside Lebanon for those people, but also that Hezbollah, essentially a terrorist organization in the eyes of Israel, don't respond and target to Israel in the way they have been doing over the last 7 weeks, Anna.
Colonel Jack, Hezbollah was not part of these negotiations. The negotiations or talks between Israel and Lebanon. Hezbollah is this organization that operates inside Lebanon. The Lebanese government saying they will take meaningful steps to prevent Hezbollah from attacking Israel or going on offense, essentially. But do they have much influence or capability to rein in Hezbollah, especially given the weakness of the Lebanese armed forces?
No, they don't. But there are two vectors here to keep in mind. One is Israel on the one hand, and the other is Iran. We have to remember that Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. To the extent that some sort of peace arrangement can be made with Iran, under whatever circumstances that are negotiated, that may have a direct impact on whether or not Iran will be able to continue to supply and motivate Hezbollah to continue what it's doing. So these are, it sounds like they're artificially interrelated, but they're not. They're really interrelated principally because Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. And a peace agreement with Iran may directly drive a circumstance in which the Lebanese government will not have to police its own area, and Israel will have some sense of security. On the other hand, the fact is that the Israeli people, the voters who keep Netanyahu in office, are not particularly interested in relying on the Lebanese government to rein in Hezbollah, which is why Israel's been highly motivated to go as far as it possibly can into Lebanon. As a matter of fact, all the way to the Litani River, south of which Hezbollah has for years been able to operate without any interference from the Lebanese government. So the short answer is no. The Lebanese army is not capable of policing it themselves, but a comprehensive arrangement among the United States, Israel, Lebanon, and Iran may in fact be able to rein Hezbollah in.
We know Israel is demanding disarmament of Hezbollah. Is that goal realistic? I'm thinking about Hamas, and it hasn't been disarmed.
No, and I don't think that we can expect Hezbollah to disarm either. On the other hand, if Israel can be convinced that Hezbollah is not going to be able to be a factor, is not going to be able to threaten Israelis in the northern part of the country, then it may all work. We have to remember that things like this are always done in phases, like a military operation. Step number one is to do what we've seen today. Next step will be agreement on certain aspects, but not all aspects of what the countries would like to have. And ultimately, the demands that Hezbollah give up altogether may become moot if there is some control by Iran over Hezbollah to keep it from being a terrorist organization, continuing to be a terrorist organization.